I'm now delighted to be introducing to you our esteemed panel, where we're going to talk through some of the findings and get some opinion, some expert opinion around some of those key questions and some of those key drivers. So I think the panelists are now joining. We'll just give it a couple more minutes. Hey, Ben.
Hey, Nick, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Ben. And just give it another minute or two. Hi, Sophie Anne. And Sophie.
Hello. Hi, everyone.
And I think, do we have Ferran?
Yeah, hi everyone. Sorry, I was muted.
Hey, Ferran. Good to see you. Okay. All right. Now we're going to be diving into some of the findings and some of the key questions. And yeah, I'd like to start the discussion, if I may, by asking each of you to just quickly introduce yourselves, but also please highlight what you found to be most surprising in these results. And maybe I shall start with you, Ben.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Ben Geach. I'm a consultancy lead for Google, and I'm based here in London. So thank you, Nick, for going over this in your keynote Massachusetts Programmatic Survey. I think I was really curious to read the results this year because the last 12 months have been like no other for our industry and also for the wider world. In terms of what I've observed a massive shift in businesses, large and small, over to investing in digital. And that can be in all different ways, how they sell, how they communicate with their customers, and indeed what we're talking about here, about their advertising channels as well. Saying that, much of the report came as no surprise to me. There's double-digit growth year on year of programmatic and non-programmatic spend, which was to be expected, I guess, given the changes in the world. But one thing that did surprise me was that quality of media was still a large concern. I think the stat was almost 40% of the respondents ranked this as their first or second barrier to investment. To me, it feels like the industry has made great steps forward in this regard, but obviously that's not pulling through in the data. So there's been a lot of innovation in measurement, transparent buying practices, but for me, it perhaps acts as a strong reminder that things like brand safety and privacy are of real great importance to brands. And after all, consumers who are receiving this advertising really care about these topics deeply. So I think that it's clear for me, taking out the reports, that a clear focus on the industry in the coming years may be shifting from good to great in this regard for the quality of media and the transparent buying practices would be something that we should take on board. So that was my takeaway from something that surprised me from the results.
Yeah, absolutely, Ben, because I think at one point we talk about in the survey that actually one of the drivers to investment was greater transparency around reporting as well. So it's interesting that there seems to be almost a conflict in the report itself as well. But you raise a really good point then. If I could come to you, Anne-Sophie, again, please introduce yourself. And then, yeah, if you want to come back on maybe what Ben highlighted or anything else you found surprising in the survey as well.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Anne-Sophie Zeller. I'm a publisher business development director for Adform. And yes, what I found so I definitely agree with Ben about because yes, there is a rise of brand safety measurement, fraud, better, Nick. So yeah, definitely surprising on that front. But I think on my side, what was the most surprising was the in-housing. Advertiser going the decrease of advertisers, but also publishers going in-housing. So that was actually quite a big surprise for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Given that in 2021, I think that 50% of advertisers were looking to in-house, and I think we just said that the decline to 16%, potentially highlighting that maybe it's more difficult than advertisers had initially planned for. Ferran, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself and maybe come back on that, if you know what your observations were.
Yeah, for sure. Hi everybody. It's very nice to be here with you today. I'm Ferran. I work at Samsung Ads. I joined them about 1.5 years ago. and I've been in the programmatic CTV space for the 5-6 years. So I'm very happy to see this. Mainly the last two slides saying that programmatic is increasing and that CTV is a big focus. No, but I agree. Actually, what surprised me as well was this trend of more or less hybrid and in-housing and more, basically the consultancies and agencies regaining the trust of the advertiser. So I want to be positive, and I think that's what's driving that trend probably. I get more and more, and we see more and more activity on this front as well.
So coming back to you, Ferran, as a publisher, with this trend of decline in in-housing, is that further complicating how you or who you speak with, or understanding who is influencing the ad dollars that you want to be running across your channel? How are you going to use this information to navigate around this?
Yeah, it's a good question. I personally, that was a surprise for me. So I had not noticed. So I wouldn't say that we did anything different because of this trend. But yeah, I think it's, as I mentioned, I think it's more like a positive on the consultancies and the agencies regaining this trust. Obviously, I think there's also the cost element. You already mentioned that as a barrier, like we find that in-housing can be a higher cost as well for some advertisers, and it needs a large budget and size. But I think it's more, the market is getting better and better at supporting advertisers.
And Anne-Sophie, being a demand-side platform, obviously it's critical for you to be speaking to those that are controlling the marketing dollars so that you can give the kind of best advice. How are you overcoming this, or how is this information helping you to decide where you should be spending your time?
I think, as I said, it was a surprise to me, because this is not really what we are seeing. We are seeing a lot of advertisers with going very successful with in-housing their operations. But then what I can see from my point of view as well is a lot of collaboration. So I would say that we've been involved in a lot of discussions where both the advertisers and the agency, and also the ad tech partners, and sometimes the publisher, were all gathered in a room. So I guess the advertisers are more involved in general, but there is that collaboration and that three-party collaboration, I would say.
And would you say that coming to you, Ben, this kind of is we can draw parallels with advertisers maybe underestimating the talent required for in-housing or navigating kind of programmatic? It is complex. We've seen how the use of data has also shifted and how others are planning on using data. Do you think actually it's the agencies clearly have got historic expertise here, and maybe the advertisers have found that as actually a barrier to entry, that they don't have that, they don't have those smarts, that talent? How are you seeing this from Google's perspective?
Yeah, I think all of the above, really. I think that we don't make things easy for us in this industry with using technical solutions. There's a lot of different disparate solutions which need to coexist to make the ecosystem work. A lot of these require some human intervention, so some smart humans to be able to control it and use it to the maximum ability. And I think that what we've seen in the last 6 to 12 months is there's an efficiency drive there. Some of our advertisers want to get to market quicker, they want to be better than their competitors, and they want to be more efficient than their competitors. And that kind of goes against the grain sometimes with a test and learn approach, which naturally takes a bit of time to iterate. So getting that knowledge and that experience to be able to get running faster, I think is very important to advertisers to get a competitive edge in a tough market.
It is a tough market. Just drawing on that and what you were saying about cost efficiencies. Clearly, we're enduring some kind of macroeconomic kind of headwinds across Europe. And do you think that is also playing a role?
I think it is. I think every dollar is being scrutinized more than it has been, perhaps in the last couple of years. So while that's, I think, an important, healthy way to look at your spend, to look at what your return on what your spend is, there are alternative ways to do it as well. So we're seeing an increasing number of our advertisers are putting more trust in the algorithms to do the bidding at scale. And I want to get away from this sort of data science for data science sake, but trusting in the investment and the investment driving results and automating that is really key, because when you're, for example, an online retailer and you're looking to be able to optimize to lifetime value, or you're looking to be able to optimize to in near real time to other value-based bidding solutions, it's really important that you get all the data points in. And that's what my team spends a lot of our time, is making sure that those foundational data blocks are set up to be able to optimize to different KPIs in a campaign sense, different metrics than perhaps they were previously. Now that there is more scrutiny on optimizing to profit, perhaps, for a retailer.
And then that's a really good point. So supply path optimization has been a topic that's been covered by our industry, transparency in the supply path, etc. As a DSP, Anne-Sophie, how can you support, as we touched on the macroeconomic headwinds, how are you seeing yourself supporting kind of advertisers to identify those cost efficiencies while still buying quality?
It's something that you raised, the supply path optimization, because we are both on both sides. Actually, we are like, yes, we are a demand side platform, but we also have an SSP. So the supply path optimization is then like quite natural. And the cost efficiency is also definitely something that we promote in our business, because again, being the same technology, you can save costs. And also we were part of that ISBA report on the supply chain transparency. And actually, we were super happy with the results, because this report that was conducted actually by PwC showed that we had a lower tech tax, which is actually great news for us, because it's great news for our clients on both the publisher side and the advertiser side.
And which is a really good point. And coming to you, Ferran, as a publisher and in an area of the industry, which is obviously, there's quite a lot of demand. We're seeing increased demand for CTV. I guess when you compare CTV to linear TV, there are efficiencies there in terms of reaching TV viewers. How do those SPO efforts work from a CTV perspective? Do we talk the same language? Are there the same challenges? Or
no,
is CTV?
It's a great point. Actually, CTV we're programmatic as well. It's a digital world, right? So compared with other programmatic channels, our CPMs are higher. So it takes the topic we're talking is actually very recurrent with our clients. But yeah, compared with TV, like basically clients are trying to compare TV and CTV. So it's very interesting. Digital buyers are trying to look at the new models of how to buy connected TV as well. For example, there's a cost per completed view. There is a topic more and more common. On our side, we sell on CPM, but we are trying to help and listen and be empathetic with our clients and see and calculate it for them. We're lucky, our video completion rate is very high, so cost per completed view is very decent for clients. And trying to bridge on the other side, linear and connected TV. I'm going to talk about Samsung ads, but we're in a very unique position, thanks to the consent of our TVs and that to bridge both with second-party data that you were mentioning on your report as well. And so, yeah, it's a very interesting space.
Yeah, and you hit that on the head. I think we almost sometimes need to remember that what we're doing is connecting advertisers to audiences, and hopefully doing that in a way which is both compliant and cognizant of the user experience. Use of data was cited within the report and the change in use of data, the decline from first party and third party. Why do you think we saw those big swings from the advertisers identifying first party and third party data and shifting to second party data? What do you think's driving that? Who wants to take that one?
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
No, you go, Anne-Sophie, please.
Okay. That to me wasn't a surprise, that one, because yeah, the deprecation of cookies is already happening. So basically when, first party data, but from an advertiser point of view, and third party data decrease, to me, it's not a surprise, because what it means is that on the other side, from the publisher point of view, and to Ferran's point, they are using this data and there is more control from the publishers, and it's totally in line on what we are seeing on our platform, for example, because we are seeing like a huge increasing scale of first party IDs, but also data from our publishers. So there is definitely, I think, an addressability issue as well when it comes to alongside that deprecation of cookies. I think because, I don't know if you read that article from Adweek, I think it was. The CEO of it was saying that actually buyers can reach only like 30% of their customers. So basically, and the answer to that is really going to first party data from a publisher point of view.
Interesting. And Ferran, I can see you furiously nodding there. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to Anne-Sophie's.
No, I just wanted to add the angle of the connected TV space as well, because until now, connected TV publishers had to say that trackers were not allowed, first-party data was not allowed, third-party data was not allowed, and that was because of the basically most AVOD publishers that didn't have the content management platform required for GDPR. So in our space, I think when more and more publishers just start using the CMP, we'll see actually an increase on third-party trackers and like IAS mode. And
okay. And Ben, obviously Google doesn't play an insignificant role in this space. So I don't know if there's anything you wanted to kind of share with us with regards to the use of data.
No, sure. I think, Nick, what you said at the beginning was really critically important. So with all of this technology and all of these systems, we've got to remember that there are customers, there are users at the end of each of these ads, right? So they're having an experience, which may be good or bad. I think that representing the buy side, which is the majority of what my team does, often advertisers that have a direct connection with their consumers, such as online retail, it's very clear that there are strong demands for individuals' privacy, particularly around their first-party data use. So there was a privacy by design report, which you can get from the IAB's website, which really highlighted this. And one of the key things that stood out for me was it found that the negative impact of providing a really poor privacy experience was almost that severe as a data breach in customers' eyes. This is really enlightening to me, that you've got to take this seriously, because this is something that's really concerning and something that is really important to consumers, and we should try not to disconnect the technology from the users that see the ads. Practically, this means that consumers are switching brands to brands where there are bigger and better first-party data practices that they give more secure access to their data as well. I think of this in three ways, right? So first-party data has its place for sure, and it's critically important. But you must think about the 3 M's are being meaningful, so explaining to the consumer what the value exchange is there and what their data is being used for. Being memorable, so making sure that you remind them what's being shared at a cadence and a method that they want. So maybe that's a privacy review email, or maybe that's consent banners. It could be a number of different technologies. And the third one, which I think is critically important, is make it simple to manage it. So if users want to be able to manage it and see what data is available, manage the controls that they're used for, then build a decent system and a decent tool to do that's not fragmented across the ecosystem. We recently released My Ad Center, which is a tool that's directly came out of some of the findings in the Privacy by Design report that was done in combination with Ipsos, and available on the IAB site, because I think that's quite enlightening reading for this topic.
And so that's really interesting, because it's all about giving the controls to the consumer to make some informed decisions about how their data is used. But not every business touches the consumer. So how do those businesses that don't touch the consumer kind of adhere to that, and how do they ensure that they're kind of delivering on those 3 M's that you just talked about, Ben?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it perpetuates through the whole ecosystem, right? There are various touch points which consumers have and various amounts of data which is used, but giving unified tools as an industry across all of these platforms is something easy that a consumer can then have control of their data and then be able to opt out or change their settings as required. The last thing we want to do is have a whole load of different tools and the consumer's just bewildered by it. So that's really the ethos of sort of privacy by design, is be as conservative as you can to start off with, and then allow controls and be transparent about what the consumers are. So it's a difficult challenge to solve for, but I think we're making steps forward on it.
And given that there are some obvious complexities around creating those controls, and I don't think there's a standard yet when it comes to how we communicate consent from publisher sites or from advertiser sites to the consumer. Do you think that could also be what's driving advertiser interest around curated marketplaces, where actually, because privacy and compliance it's quite a difficult problem to solve at scale. Therefore, actually, if we go for curated marketplaces, at least we're kind of using maybe content as a proxy to identifying an audience. Are we seeing an increase conversely in businesses adopting that, or advertisers adopting that for that reason?
Yeah, I think so. And I also think that there's an increase in use of sort of aggregation and modeling methodologies to replace first-party and third-party data sets as well. And on top of that, you've got a load of other tools like contextual targeting as well, which is not targeting individual users, but able to target the content of where that's seen. So if you're browsing a parenting site, for example, then it indicates something about the content and potentially something that the advertisers would want to match with as well. So I think there are a number of different mechanisms, but what I'm seeing here is that consumers are saying loud and clear that they want controls, they want it to be transparent, and they just want to understand where their data is being used for. There's a high visibility among users for that concern.
And Anne-Sophie, if I can come to you, are you seeing a similar change in the use of data? We talked earlier about you both being an end-to-end platform. So obviously you see what's happening on the sell side and the buy side. Are you seeing a change in the way the data is being used within your platform, or?
Yeah, as I was saying, like we definitely see like an increase in first-party ID and data from the publisher point of view. So just to give you an idea, like we see 72 billion of bid requests a day with first-party ID. So definitely, yes. And then, but I think what's missing a bit, and it's education. Like I think like the buy side needs to be more aware of this, because to me, like there is actually scale today. And yeah, on that first party ID and data. So it's definitely what we are seeing on our side.
And Ferran, we talk about digital holistically in terms of the use of first party data, second party data, curated marketplace and context. And CTV is still relatively nascent, right? The use of data within CTV, are we seeing, are there barriers to entry in terms of CTV around the different types of data or data flexibility?
Depends on every type of data, but I actually I really like what Ben mentioned of privacy by design. And actually it's so important to let the end user decide for themselves. And actually it's not once, you have to ask them every 6 months. So that's why it's very important that publishers have their consent management platforms ready, all this. But yeah, like data on CTV, obviously CTV at the end of the day is the biggest screen of the house, right? It's as the new TV, usually it's been thought like as a channel for branding. And it is a digital device, so we talk a lot about data, but let's not forget that it's one of the best ways to use CTV is branding as well. That it's like reach, like a very good reach of the population very quickly. But there is options for data on CTV. On our case, we use, thanks to the consent, the second party data options we have. But yeah, it depends on every publisher, I guess.
Got it. And we talked about drivers, we talked about data, and one of the other observations were within the survey was investment barriers, and buyers saying that they wanted more granularity of control and transparency. So how are we delivering that as an industry? How can we reduce those barriers, perceived barriers?
I think it's before also you ask about supply path optimization, what drives supply path optimization? And I think the advertiser, they want to understand better what they are buying, how things work. And so how do we solve for this? I think it's talking more, having more meetings and explaining ourselves better, I think.
I think there is also existing initiatives already, the sellers.json, ads.txt, supply path object, but I think there is a limitation on all of these. So they helped, but I think because there is no really like validation, or it's based on like the declaration of each party. So there is definitely, it's limited. So I definitely think that, the way forward should be like a third-party audit, like PwC. So PwC has done like these ISBA reports that Adform part of. I think it's definitely the way forward to have an external audit that people can trust to validate these like supply chain transparency.
I think trust is absolutely the key word there, right? So without advertiser and consumer trust, all of this investment will fail. So to be able to gain that through technological ways, but also through education is really critically important, because some of this doesn't need a technological and a technological solution in its entirety. A lot of it is about educating the market of what's possible and what best practices should be put in place. So it's always a combination for me of sort of education and technology going hand in hand to solve these problems.
And is that educating the consumer, or is that educating the industry? And because I think also, I like what Anne-Sophie was saying about auditing, but do we need to educate the auditors?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think that it's multi-layered, right? I think there needs to be an appreciation at every layer, but we mustn't lose sight of the fact that there are users at the end of this that are receiving the advertising. And for the advertising to be effective, it needs to be timely. It needs to be something that's efficient and useful for those users as well. But absolutely up the chain as it goes through technology platforms and the buyers and potentially auditors and indeed the trade bodies. Education at every level is never a bad thing.
I was going to say even ourselves, no, we always keep learning. So
of course.
I was going to say, we work in a very complex industry. Naturally, the way in which we enable advertising to be bought and sold has become even more complex. And again, I have to come back to it, but talking about like the operational model, so we saw a significant drop in the number of advertisers in housing. We talked about it at the top of the panel, and we talked about it in the presentation. And bearing in mind what you were just talking about with regards to education, it feels like that's really maybe what's driving that drop in housing is the fact that there needs to be more education so advertisers can feel more confident in kind of taking these decisions themselves. But what do you think about this drop in the number of advertisers in housing, their programmatic trading? I'm going to come to you, Anne-Sophie.
I definitely think that there is a realization from advertisers that, that hiring is actually, could be a key barrier. And also it's hard to hire, but it's hard to retain these people. So there's definitely that realization, I think, from advertisers. So they want to be more involved and do the things themselves, but then they should, and they do take the advantage of all the experts. So it could be agencies, but also ad tech. And I definitely think that ad tech and agencies, and even us, like we have more a consulting approach. And here, the education is really key here.
And do you think
I think that builds for a really good partnership, right, with your customers? Touching on your element there for the hiring, I think hiring still remains a challenge in the industry, especially bringing people into more junior roles. So I think as an industry, we tend to lead towards like very specific pre-existing skills within a candidate pool. I know that I've done this myself and had to catch myself. Like people who have worked with XYZ platforms, who know how to buy media on mobile or CTV or analytics. But maybe we should be looking at this a bit differently, and maybe we should be broadening out our view on suitability to non-industry skill sets, collaboration, problem solving, drive to learn as well, which I think feeds in to be able to get those experts for which you can have the benefits of being able to outsource some of your operational stuff to people who know the industry inside and out and can accelerate your roadmap and your investment in a particular area to capitalize on it first.
So do you think, on that note, that actually there might have been a decrease in advertisers in housing completely, but there isn't necessarily a complete shift away from in-housing, that maybe actually what the advertisers are happy to do is maybe in-house ad operations or in-house a more simple component, and then use consultancies, agencies to maybe advise, make informed decisions around more complex programmatic challenges or solutions?
I think that's absolutely right. So where I've seen partners to be involved is commonly on quite complex projects. Maybe it's multi-platform, or it's doing different components from different areas of the business. And that's really where their expertise and experience shines through. And also having the context of what that industry or vertical looks like as well. What's worked well in the past? What are the things that, it's almost sometimes about avoiding the things that are set up for failure than going for the right things. So it's picking your bets sometimes. So being able to to have that experience is invaluable in that respect, I think, as well. But with everything, I think a hybrid approach is probably the best approach here, where there's specialist expertise within the business, whether that be a publisher or an advertiser, that know the business inside out, partnering with external partners who can provide specific project-led initiatives and experience. We found to work quite well.
Fantastic. This has been a really interesting conversation. I'm conscious that we're coming up close to end of time. There's a couple of questions in the chat, and one coming from Stuart. He's asked, are advertisers talking about keeping their third-party cookie strategy while they still can? And I guess what Stuart's saying here is deprecation of cookies isn't happening until, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, Q4 2024. So are we seeing that advertisers are continuing to keep talking about keeping their third-party cookie strategy while they still can? And are they looking to use this to build the best defense for when Chrome does stop recognizing third-party cookies? Who wants to take that question? 2 questions.
2 in 1. So I can go first briefly. I think that a lot of the more advanced and more progressive advertisers that I work with have already got plans in place to understand how they're going to be migrating off this. I think this is critically important for the future health of their business. So they're looking at aggregated models, and they're looking at using data science to be able to interpret for some of the signal that is lost through this, and the various different initiatives that are happening in the industry. They're leaning in to do that because there's really the ability to shape what these solutions look like in the future if they get in early there as well. So I would say that the more progressive advertisers are doing it already and making that shift and not waiting for deadlines.
Yeah, I think so too, because, and also even if it's like in 2024, deprecation of cookies are already happening. You have the cookieless environment like Safari and Firefox, but also on Google Chrome, you can see that there is already a deprecation of cookies, and first-party IDs is also increasing on Google Chrome as well. And as I was saying earlier, like there is an addressability issue like coming with that deprecation, which is actually happening now. So I definitely think that advertisers will have more of that first party strategy, first party in a way that like second party, if you want, on the advertiser side, strategy in the near future.
Fantastic. And I think we've got one question which I want to direct to you, Ferran, if I may, which has come from Can, which Yildiz, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Why cost per completed view is a KPI for CTV? Is it mostly impossible to skip the video on this device? Are we planning to move towards attention metrics in CTV at some point?
That's a great question, and it depends on the player and the format that each publisher has. But on most AVOD platforms like ours, it's a non-skippable ad. So the video completion rate is about 95%, or it depends on the publisher and the ad length and many other factors. But basically, because the video completion rate is so high, it's non-skippable, and then the cost per completed view comes down quite cost effective, compared with other skippable formats.
Fantastic. Guys, that was a fantastic, I really enjoyed talking to you. It feels like there's a whole lot going on in our industry. We talked about education, talked about transparency, we talked about the surprises around the use of data, and obviously we talked about CTV. So yeah, I just want to say a big thank you to you all for making time to join us this afternoon. And yeah, fantastic, really good conversation.
Thank you, Nick. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, Nick.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Take
everyone.
care, guys.